Let's talk about how to legally decline a vaccine. It's something I keep seeing on the internet. This is a little pop up, unscheduled video, but I keep seeing in my group, the American Freedom Information Center, I keep seeing posts come in and I see them throughout the internet about how you can legally decline a vaccine. And I wanted to focus in on that issue for a minute. The fact checkers are starting to mark them as being false, that you can legally decline a vaccine. And I really wanted to get into the reality of it. For those of you that don't know, I'm Shawn McBride. I am an attorney, corporate attorney, but I've focused heavily lately on freedom issues. I started the American Freedom Information Center Facebook group along with some other attorneys and people. And I'm really focused on getting people aware about the laws and the issues around forced vaccines. So it's something I've spent a lot of time on researching here. And it's something we've spent a lot of attention on. So more and more people are starting to think about a mandatory vaccine. There's been a USA Today article on the issue. There's been an Alan Dershowitz interview about the issue, and there's been an Alan Dershowitz debate with RFK Jr. on the issue. So there's been tremendous talk about a New England Journal of Medicine article talking about the fact that states should look into mandating a vaccine. So we're starting to see a lot of movement towards a mandated vaccine. And now let's clarify, these are talking about vaccines for everybody, not just children. So much of the vaccine information and research you find out there is about childhood vaccines. Do kids have to take a vaccine to go to school? We are talking about a vaccine for everybody, for adults, children, basically everybody in the population. Many states have a forced vaccine law on their books. If they've been adopted as part of the emergency planning, a lot of them came in after September 11th. There was a Model Emergency Powers Act that went around, and lots of provisions like that got in there. If you're interested, we did a separate video on this here over at the McBride Attorneys Law Show YouTube channel. We talked about Florida's forced vaccine laws. We also talked about some other state forced vaccine laws, 2 different videos. I recommend you go check them out. But today I want to focus on legally declining a vaccine. And many of these articles claim that you can claim that your body is sovereign and the government doesn't have authority over you. Well, let me tell you, you basically, by being born into the U.S. or pretty much any other country, they're going to claim authority over you. You are born into the legal system. You are bound to it. Yes, you didn't have any choice. Yes, you didn't consent to it. But there you are. Yuval Harari, who wrote the book Sapiens, talks a lot about that and about how we have these notions of countries and how they're big fictions that are just run. And that's really what they are. We've created this concept of country, citizenship, country of a system of laws, but that is what it is. We are bound to the system of laws by virtue of being born into the system. And for the most part, that is not going to fly in a court. You're not going to be able to go to a court and say, I do not consent to the regulation of the government because I never okayed being a citizen of this country. It's just not something they listen to. It's been argued before. We see this in the tax cases. People say, I never consented to being part of this tax system. They still have to pay their taxes or they go to jail. We're going to see the same line of things on the forced vaccine, I think. Also, we have the Jacobson case from 1905, which says, there can be a forced vaccine, essentially. A lot of people point to the fact that Jacobson was only about a fine, not about actually plunging a needle into somebody's arm. The problem with Jacobson is there's also Buck versus Bell, another U.S. Supreme Court case, followed about 2 decades later. And Buck versus Bell allows forced sterilization. So if you think the court is not going to allow people to get vaccinated when they've approved states sterilizing people, you probably have to rethink your analysis. So just objecting on the basis of you don't have authority of me is probably not going to carry the day in a court. They're going to say, you're a citizen, you're subject to the laws. We have a system of laws. Everybody's bound by it. You're in. The other piece I see in these is these long-winded medical arguments where, what's in the vaccine? Is it dangerous for me? Jacobson did recognize a medical exemption. So that is a very powerful tool in this argument. The question is, we don't know what those medical exemptions are going to look like. If we take a look at the Florida statute, for instance, on forced vaccines, it all goes to the state health officer. They determine who gets isolated, quarantined, and then if they decide the isolation quarantine is not practical, they can then go to the forced vaccination. There is no medical exemption written into the law. We imagine there has to be one because Jacobson back in 1905 said there should be a medical exemption. What that medical exemption looks like, we don't know because the legislature didn't put it in there. That is a possible avenue of attack to the law, but that's going to take a while to fight through the court systems. Even so, they're probably going to tell the state health officer to make up the medical exemption. And will it just be you go to your doctor and get them to sign a form and you turn it in like they do often for the childhood vaccines? Or is it going to be something more like what we're seeing in California, where there's a board of independent doctors going to look at your file, say yes or no, determine your fate? We really don't know. But the idea that there's some simple formula on the internet to just decline a vaccine is really misguided. The legal system is structured. There is case law. There's a lot of push towards it. Now, many of us feel there are constitutional fights to it. There's reasons why Jacobson probably needs to be made more protective of citizens based on later U.S. Supreme Court cases. We're working on researching and developing all of that, and we know that, but it all will come down to what the court says. But to say that there's an easy answer where you can just decline a vaccine is really oversimplifying the issue. The best avenue, based on what we've seen, and Jacobson really makes it a state issue. It says you have to go to your state legislature if you want to overturn a forced vaccine law, and the state legislature potentially has the power to do a forced vaccine. So based on Jacobson, the place to battle this is in your state legislature. Get these laws off the books, remove the authority to force vaccines. That's going to be a much safer route than relying on some picture you see on the internet that the court system probably won't recognize. And that's just the reality of it. I welcome you to chat with me more. I'd love to see your comments. Come join me over at the American Freedom Information Center Facebook group. Get on our email list. We're constantly emailing about freedom issues, particularly forced vaccines. And I'd also love you to subscribe to the McBride Attorneys Law Show channel here on YouTube so you can get more of our updates. But most importantly, go get on our email list so we can keep in touch with you and keep you updated, because the internet meme is not going to do it. It's going to take a bigger fight. It's probably going to take changing the laws in your state legislature in order to make a difference. All right, folks, I'm Shawn McBride. Really appreciate you joining me and getting informed on this issue. Looking forward to your questions in the comments and continuing the conversation at the American Freedom Information Center Facebook group.